Hey, Justin, welcome to the MedTech Unbox podcast.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Great. I'm glad to have you on. I've been following you and your company grow over the years and real excited to learn a little bit more how you've grown and some of the new things that you're offering and kind of a big splash next week at MD&M East. So why don't we get started and tell us a little bit about how you got into the business and how you grew your own business.
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, thank you for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to share what we think is a pretty exciting story. So hopefully, you yourself and your listeners find it intriguing in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I started Med Device back in 2004. You hear by the American accent, obviously from Salt Lake City, Utah. But I've spent the majority of my time internationally, but really homegrown in the state of Arizona, where I served as a medical device rep for the great Merit Medical, which was a family company for me, and a company that I had the privilege of, observing, really from the early days of a small office and, a couple shared desks all the way up to the billion-dollar enterprise that it's become. So it started in med device in Arizona, but really over on the OEM side. So it really was an OEM guy, I suppose. That was my foray. Spent a little bit of time in the hospital world, so made the shift over to the clinical side of the business. And to be very honest, love the clinical side of the business, but really just, I love the manufacturing more, where innovation and ideas really come together. I think at the clinical side, which is where the magic happens and is why we do what we do. There's so much that goes in, to a device before it gets to that point. And I really love that. So spent a good amount of time in OEM, ran the Midwest for Merit Medical. I think that was in 2008. Was a regional director for Merit. And then I had this incredible opportunity to take the global OEM division with Merit in late 2008, early 09. And really had the opportunity to formalize the division, I suppose, and scale it, really build out the marketing, build out the engineering. And so, the OEM side of the business is in my blood, and made the jump over to Europe in 2010. Spent 5 years in Europe, really actually away from the OEM side or concurrently with OEM. And I did the Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Merit, where I set up, the direct sales, or expanded the direct sales and set up a significant portion of the distribution channels in a lot of the emerging markets in Europe, Middle East, Africa. And then returned back to the corporate office for Merit, I think in mid 2015. Took a corporate role, did product, global product management, kind of that old story. Product management, corporate strategy, was a core team member of the M&A group. And we did a lot of acquisitions and a lot of integrations. And I think, my time at Merit, I think, came to an end. I think like a lot of people's, the page turned. Interestingly enough, what I learned at Merit was, I think, really important because, as I spent time in the clinical side of the business, the OEM side, and then over into the international side, I think one of the things I learned and really ingrained into me from my father and from Merit was, was really the little things that mattered. And I think, Merit, if you were to put it in baseball terms, was really a company at the time that got on first base quite a bit. Not a whole lot of home runs, but a lot of those singles. And that's what really, I think, counts at the end of the day, is getting those products and technologies out, no matter how big or how small. As I think your audience probably knows, and certainly the MedTech world does, Merit's components-based businesses, they're small. When I was doing corporate M&A for Merit and global product management and marketing, I noticed that there was a very significant amount of opportunity in smaller components and things that really the companies, they grow up, the Cooks grow up, the Merits grow up, and companies' needs change. And you don't have the ability to do the small safety needles or the little pair of procedural products that you maybe once built the company on. And, deep inside, I think that those are what never changes in interventional medicine. So I had the opportunity, once I had left Merit, to start an incubator with several partners in Belgium, really with a thesis of taking devices that were post-approval, so they were ready to go, but pre-launch. And so, which is a common story in this business. You have, MedTech entrepreneurs or founder operators that, have these great ideas, a lot of physicians, but they're not really sure how to get it out to the markets and to scale. So we started an incubator that focused on that. And interestingly enough, there was a whole bunch of shifts happening in the medical device world with respect to MDR. I might add that the incubator is in Belgium, which is where I'm broadcasting from today. And, we found ourselves in a position where in the procedure pack business, I think everybody knows what a procedure pack is. Maybe. I say maybe because they mean lots of different things to different people. But one of the things we saw was there was a mass exodus in this procedure pack space. And if you really step back and think about what a procedure pack is, and some people will call them packs or sets or systems, but really what it is at its core, it's a culmination of devices that either interact with each other or don't, to deliver, the full global solution in an interventional procedure. So MDR shows up, everybody leaves this space, consolidation continues to happen. And we find ourselves at the incubator in a really unique spot where we actually have a phone call from a supplier that is in this space on the raw material side. And that conversation in a small cafe in Amsterdam really develops into, we had to really roll a procedure pack business back out, which we had done many, many times before. So we had a blueprint of success for that. But it was going to be different this time. The pack business was going to be very therapeutic. We were going to include products that most companies did not include in procedure packs. And we thought that was our differentiating point. We thought that you could include things that most companies prefer to leave out, often for profitability reasons. Putting things in packs actually tends to kind of erode the margins, to be very frank with you, because you're not getting a market-based price, you're getting a cost plus. And the long and short of it is we end up launching this pack business, SYNDEO Medical, that goes very, very well. And it didn't go very well because, we're the smartest guys in the world. It went very well because we brought the market back to what it was used to. So the winds have changed. I think a lot in medical device or life or innovation, you talk about, well, what are we going to change? I think we were saying, what are we not going to change?
Yeah.
And that pack business really took off. But it wasn't without the challenges. So, we had to go get the MDR approval. The dreaded MDR, which is the reason that the majority of companies either consolidated or just exited altogether, was a big part of it. So as this little tiny company with a few small investors were able to, go pull off the MDR approval, which we're really happy to announce we had in November of 2024. For two product lines, or product families rather, SYNDEOPack, which is our fully custom business. And then Essential, which is not standalone, but not custom. It's right in the middle of the road with everything you need, but, gets those procedures done. And long and short of it is, we end up seeing a very significant opportunity where great companies, some in the United States, some in Europe, are really focused on big ticket items, high technology, but they don't have the accessories. They don't have the paraprocedural products to get things done.
Right.
And so, one of those conversations turns into two of those conversations. And before you know it, I think we just have arrived at a point where we said, we actually can bring something in the OEM space where, we're not going to develop components. Of course we do.
Yeah.
Our core flywheel, and we're not really in that big capital, highly therapeutic area. We're going to live right in the middle. And the value that we're going to bring, we hope to convey at the MD&M East conference, is we think that we can walk in and work with the blue chips and the startups and everybody in between. And we think that we can go to them with an MDR approved solution to say, you've spent all of your time and all of your capital resources developing something novel, but you have to have the nuts and bolts to get the procedure successfully done. And we think that we're the only guys that I'm aware of that have that solution. And so that's our goal. Our goal is to take that to the MD&M conference and show the companies that, we can bring something really unique, not to sell our product, but alongside sells their product. And as these companies get further and further away from home, supply chain challenges are real. So we bring continuity, we bring solutions. We're doing something that I think a lot of companies have gotten away from. So past the prologue, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, it seems like you're really filling the gap there. We have all these novel interventional devices from electrophysiology, structural heart, neurovascular, but there's these procedural kits that accompany them, and the OEMs that are focusing on the technology and the materials to develop minimally invasive procedures. They really need somebody else, it seems like, to focus on that. And that's kind of where you come into play.
Yeah, we've had conversations recently, with laser fibers and technologies that, frankly are over my head.
Yeah.
But, really interesting thing for people say, what kind of bowl can we put this in? We have a hydration requirement. It's hard to fill. Like, how do we hydrate this?
Yeah.
And, in the labs, how do we make sure that there's a consistent hydration process? And in some markets, they'll use plastic and polypropylene bowls. In other markets, depending on where you're in the world, they'll use, the metal kind of be older, reusable stuff. So, but just to listen to some of these questions that come from these great companies,
Yeah.
some of these really small issues that we think we can step in. I know it sounds silly, but we've got a beautiful guide wire bowl that when there's a guide wire or a laser fiber in, flip it upside down, it doesn't move.
Yeah.
And this is, again, we're really filling a unique need there. But we get excited about the basic stuff. We really
Yeah.
do.
No, well, I love how you said you get excited about even in your early days manufacturing, right? And I mentioned to you how I enjoyed so much when I visited your dad. I know this isn't about Merit Medical, but there was an intro there. And it sounds like there's some genetics there where he would always be so passionate about showing me a new molded part or an inflation device or braided tubing for an inflation device. I really respected him for really getting in and understanding and having passion about the nuts and bolts manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, there's a
Yeah.
merit story here. We can't ignore that. I was trained well, so genetically, of course, right? Yeah, I was trained well. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's the little things. He
Yeah.
once said, to me, when the little things stop mattering, you're finished. Your
Yeah.
company, you hang it up, you're finished. And
Right.
I think we really carried that into sin. Even so much, are the labels on the boxes straight? I used to
Right.
watch my old man walk out to the warehouse and say, "This label is," but it's those items,
Right.
and I think we've taken that into the cath lab, cardiology, radiology. We've said, listen, you've got all these great devices, but did anybody think about the paraprocedural? Did anybody think about the procedure? I mean, simple things. Did anybody think about the patient draping? We have these new devices, we have these new procedures. PE is a big one, but the draping systems are old.
Yeah.
Or the vascular access systems, people go, oh, we didn't really think about, we tested it in the United States with product A, but when we get over to France, product A is not available, we need product B. So that continuity of clinical continuum to get the
Yeah.
product used to its fullest potential. Frankly, I think we say at SYNDEO, we're about empowering outcomes. And some we really believe, because if we do our job right, we design these procedural kits and packs, the big companies, that are, or the startups that are developing novel technologies, they get to do what they do best.
Yeah.
We kind of remove that variable, from commercialization and from use.
Right.
We're having a good time.
Excellent. You said something earlier about spending some time in the cath lab and how you really enjoyed that. And what really caught me is you said, there's so much that happens, the details before you even get to the cath lab, right? And you kind of outlined some of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, tomorrow morning I'll be in Antwerp with my chief commercial officer, and we're there to listen. We're there to clinically observe that opportunity spotting, because I think one of the things that we bring with SYNDEO in our kitting business, our pack business, is really, you really can't just go to an R&D lab. You've got to go into the cath lab. Some I learned very early on in my career. We have to watch the setup. We have to watch the loud turnaround, the throughput. We have to watch the end of the day. How do they restock things?
Yeah.
Where do they keep, big devices, energy generators on wheels? you don't understand that full environment and bring that back, to your innovation hub or to your R&D lab, you're going to have a very difficult time. So I think that, there's a lot of companies. MD&M is a perfect example. There's some great companies. They're all is. I think where we stand out, where we aim to stand out is we really aim to be a therapeutic value add. So, anybody can put, a kit or a pack together and do it with great materials and great capability. I suppose the real question is, and it's something we challenge our teams on every day, is, have they been in the cath lab in the last, week or 2 weeks? And have you really understood it? And if a blue chip or a startup comes to you, an OEM says, we have this technology or this product, have you gone to the lab with the product manager? Have you understood it entirely? So I think we try to be very holistic, but also very therapeutic. We have the manufacturing capabilities, and we're truly a company, even though we're a startup. I would really argue we're at full scale. But we really bring that clinical value adds, and hopefully that is valuable to our customers and our prospective customers.
Yeah, it's not just about the components and the kit, it's understanding the workflow.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. One other thing I wanted to ask, maybe a little sensitive, maybe not. You mentioned about the pricing cost plus, and within a kit, there's components from a gauze to a guide wire. There's different value, right?
That's right.
And pricing and margins may be associated with that based on value. It must be a little bit challenging to kind of put that together from a pricing standpoint.
It's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So you're right. It is a little sensitive, but I think it's worth the discussion.
Yeah.
We can't say we're going to improve cost, of health. This is where I think the rubber meets the road. So I think principally, when you look at a device that is sold to the market as a standalone device, that device is sold at a price that somehow the market has said they're willing to pay for that. So let's call that a market-based pricing model. But our challenges and our packs, we're really, because of the way we operate the business, we're not one or two components. In some cases we really try and capture that global solution, global opportunity. We like to say the number is 80% for us. If we can capture 80% of everything that's used in that procedure, that's our target. It doesn't start there, but we hope that it ends there.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge is when you add every single component, let's say the number's 40 as an average for us, 40 components per pack. And that could be something as simple as a tubing set all the way up to a hydrophilic guide wire.
Right.
How do you take the market-based price and the willingness to pay for all of those components, add them up in some form of a group purchase in the pack, and then maybe discount it for convenience because they're buying it? And the answer is we haven't figured that piece out yet, and we haven't even tried. So when we build a procedural system or pack, you add everything in and you operate on a cost plus basis.
Right.
So we've seen examples, we presented examples where putting something inside of a procedure pack will save a customer as much as 50 or 60%. And I'll just give you an example.
Yeah.
We were just at a Belgian hospital a week ago where a standalone device was selling for 20 euros. Okay. So what is that? $21.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the procedure pack, it's about 6 or 7. So we've taken that market-based pricing inside the pack. And it was really interesting because when we were there, and we're developing some kits for another company. It was really interesting to listen to the clinical feedback. And you love it when the customer says, validates your strategy. The chief nurse said to us, asking us to do this backwards, meaning that we're asking them to buy everything in this fully designed custom solution. But the value of it to him was he has less purchase orders in place. He has, hospital access is not getting, it's getting more challenging.
Yes.
He has less salespeople. He has less of everything. It puts a little more strain on us as a company to make sure that we're doing everything right. Our supply chain is robust. But I mean, imagine that it's the one price, one part number, one supplier. So we really hope to simplify, that start to finish.
Yeah. A lot of efficiencies there that you offer.
We hope so.
A lot of work up front for you to do it, but to the end customer, a lot of efficiencies. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Okay. Excellent. appreciate you going through that, the background and the kits, and I also know that you have some exciting news about a new inflation device. If you want to be able to cover that, because I think you'll probably share that
Yeah.
platform next week at MD&M East as well.
Yeah, that'd be my pleasure. Yeah, so we have a lot of experience in inflation devices because of just where we come from, the management team. Uh, we know the merits of the world. We know the Boston, again, world-class companies.
Yes.
I think one of the things that we've heard many, many times in our journey to launch SYNDEO around the world is, people ask, "Are you going to bring out anything that's different?" Right? So it's kind of that. Well, we've seen this before. Maybe a better mousetrap, but are you bringing out anything different? And we actually took an existing platform, and we'd like to say we made it better. So we launched a SATURN. It's the inflation list. I'm actually going to show you it. Well, you can
Great.
see it on the screen.
Yes, I can. Nice.
So this is the SATURN 30. We make them in a 30 and a 40. And again, little things that we've engineered into this device that we think are just meaningful. So, number one, everybody has a photoluminescent gauge. It's got to glow in the dark, but it actually has to glow. So there's been a lot of work done, to make sure that when you're in that dim cath lab, that you have a nice photoluminescent gauge. I'll give you another one. See, it was really interesting. This brass fitting right here. There's been this big move to plastic, over the last, like 10 or 15 years. Plastic is cheaper, higher impact. There's lots of reasons that you would do it. I'll tell you what we found. What we found was when we took existing devices on the market and we pressurized them and we left them, for 24 hours, tabletop testing. What we found, and we believe is there's lots of factors we believe that connection point is one of them. What we found is that the brass just performs better. So it holds pressure better. It's more reliable. It's also more expensive. And so from our side, again, we just not cut corners on this out in any way, shape, or form. I'll give you a couple more. I think they're important.
Yeah,
so
sure.
if you look at the inflation devices on the market today, the majority of the engineering is done back here in the handle. You've got ramps, you've got all sorts of kind of moving parts. And moving parts for us means two things. It means cost and failure. It's a failure part for the device. So what we did was we took the existing, the engagement mechanism, and we put it all front and center to where you hold. So it's a very simple engineering mechanism. It's very robust. It holds a lot of pressure. The failure of the device is, or at least the opportunity for failure, we believe is reduced. And we've put the engineering into this little button. So again, it's this big mechanism back here. You got a little button. But I'll tell you, we were in a lab, and the customer says to us, "Well, if you're going to go smaller on this, on the engagement mechanism on the trigger, could I at least have it be sticky on my hand?" Which was a great idea. So, I mean, even little things. This two-shot, double molded trigger mechanism, just to give the clinician a little bit more stick, when they engage the device. And I'll just, the final one is even things like, the feed ramps. When I turn the device 360 degrees, I would expect an equal amount, almost 1-to-1 of pressure to come up. I'd expect that gauge to move up. And you'll find a lot of devices in the market today, which the resolution of the device, you're spinning this thing all the way.
Yeah.
And you're getting very little transmission, of the, the pressure of the device you're inflating. So even little things, we've changed pitch. It's just an overall, in our view, better device than what's on the market. It's new. And, I will say, when the engineering team said, "What do you want it to look like?" We said, "We want it to look like a Tesla." Now, that's not a plug for Tesla, but I think we can all appreciate, the engineering, the industrial engineering of a Tesla and the lines on it. So, we've had the product on the market for a while, but really in its OEM debut, it'll be at the MD&M conference, where we think, we hope a lot of people will stop by and play with it.
Excellent. A novel or elegant device, sometimes it's just a matter, like in this case, of several simple, small advancements that kind of add up. And that's what it seems like you've done here.
And I would say that, if you look at our portfolio and our capabilities, that's the whole company's story.
Yeah.
We did invent the procedure pack. We made it better.
Yeah.
We didn't invent, the radial sheath. We've made it better. We didn't invent the inflation device. We've made it better. So I think there's a core theme here for us, which is, innovation can come in very big packages and be very disruptive. For us, if we can find one or two ways to improve a product, that's what we've done. I think, as long as we convey that right to our customers, and when we do, they really appreciate, that attention to detail. So
Yeah.
it's been really useful for us.
That's a good point too, about even in new interventional devices. It's usually what are the unmet needs or the gaps in the predicates or the existing devices, right? And certainly there's a better pathway for regulatory. We know how you know all about that with MDR, but when you're enhancing an existing predicate, it just seems like and there's payments, right? Payment codes and things like that. It's a smoother ride.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think you hit a really important point, which is, when companies that are coming up with a new device or just iteratively working through the next generation, it's time and it's money and it's energy. So again, I think this is where, from an OEM perspective, we come in and we fill a huge gap, which is we don't want companies, generally speaking, we don't want them to think about, what if, to say it's a balloon technology, what am I going to blow this up with? You know, you do the balloon technology, you do whatever it is on the interventional side that's going to have a really meaningful difference. We'll do the paraprocedural stuff for you. And I think this is important because our MDR approval, to be very candid, we can come up with a configuration or a design, really today, and we can have that to the markets, really within 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
So we don't have to slow the innovation process down for a company to say, okay, we built product A, but we need B, C, D, E, and F to go along with it. I think we can say very quickly, we understand the requirements. Here's an MDR approved solution. And it's done very rapidly. And I think that, we've embraced MDR. I think we've built
Yeah.
a company around it because, I think once you understand it and what its intent was, it's not such a bad thing. It was a bit of a shock at first, but I think we've all adjusted. And we've got a nice, regulatory strategy and approach to bringing things to market, responsibly and swiftly.
Excellent. Justin, I love the story and I appreciate you sharing it with me and the audience and the solutions that you've come up. You kind of filled these gaps. And tell us a little more. You got some new technologies next week. We got MD&M East, and I think you're going to debut some of this. You'll have a team. You won't be there, but tell us a little more about how they can learn a little bit more. Some of your team members at MD&M East next week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a booth. We're ready to talk about, start to finish. I think for us, we'll have all of our technologies there. We have thousands and thousands of components that go into configuration. So I think our goal is, number one, we're open for business, and we're open for business. We're ready to talk projects. We're ready for project engineers to say, I'm working on, something expensive, really, really changes people's life, but I don't have the tubing set.
Right.
And I don't have this. I mean, even in preclinical work, we don't have the tools we need in the animal lab to go validate what we need to do. So, our the proverbial open sign is on at the booth. I think people will see a really good blend of plastic parts, wires, inflation devices. And I think, when we built the strategy for the Congress, was we really wanted people to walk away and there's a lot of possibilities here, and I think that's the message is
Right.
we have an incredible amount of capabilities. We're ready to jump into action and deliver some really great MDR approved solutions to the market.
Awesome. Well, I wish you all the best at next week at MD&M East and continuing to develop these components and sets to accompany these more novel, minimally invasive devices. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. So good to see you.